Mampus. Aduh. The Peranakan race of Singapore was born when Chinese traders from the Kwantong province of China came and traded and settled and intermarried the Malay women of Singapore. When I was a little girl, I remember coming home from school and spending many afternoons with my grandmother on needlework, because my grandmother, whom I call Mama, was well known for her beadwork, the stitching of kasut manik, a pair of beaded slippers that were used as an accessory to our sarong kebaya and the man's Mandarin collared lok chuan. Under my Mama's skillful and careful eyes, my stitching was often not good enough. When she looked at it, she would tease me. Adoy! Look at your stitching! Huh? So big and untidy. Please, unpick. What would your prospective mother-in-law and husband say when you give him his first gift of kasut manik? Oh, anyhow stitch, anyhow stitch. It shows your character, you know. And then I would have to unpick, using a bigger needle and a thicker one to break all the beads, and then re-stitch again. But I had a secret weapon. Whenever I wanted to divert my Mama's attention, because I cannot tahan her scrutiny anymore, I would ask her in my sweetest voice, Mama, can you tell me a story? My grandmother, she knew many stories because her grandfather, who came from China, told them all these stories to teach them virtues of honesty and perseverance and patience and also hard work. And this was her favorite. She would settle herself back, comfortable, with a faraway look. She would start. A long time ago in China, near the mouth of the Huanghe River, the Yellow River, where the mountains swept down to the sea, lived an old man of 90 years. He lived with his sons and his grandchildren in a big house at the bottom of 2 mountains. He was called the Foolish Old Man, although nobody could remember why. The land was rich and fertile, and they grew sweet tomatoes, crunchy green beans, and crispy cabbages. Beyond the vegetable field were fields of wheat that ran down all the way to the sea. When it was harvest time, the old man's 4 sons and the children would come and pick the harvest, and they would put them in baskets ready to be sold at the market. The 4 daughters-in-law would then carry these baskets on a yoke over their shoulders and go to the market, which was in town, to sell. The only thing was, town was beyond the 2 mountains, and so the 4 daughters-in-law had to start very early in the morning. They would walk on the narrow mountain path, going up and around, down and around, down and around, up and around, down and around, down and around, until they got quite dizzy. And when they reached the market, the good spots were already taken, and so they had to set their stalls up at the edge of the market. And then they would shout, "Sweet tomatoes, crisp green beans, crunchy cabbages." Not many people would walk by there, and the few that did come by would always say, "It's already late morning. How can your vegetables still be crisp and crunchy? If you sell them for me cheap, maybe I'll buy." And so, at the end of the day, when all the vegetables were sold, they had very little money to show for it. And as they packed to go back home, they started to grumble and to complain. "Why do we have to live so far away? Yeah, these 2 mountains, they make us walk very far. Actually, if there were no mountain, we can walk all the way straight here. Yeah, and if we can come earlier, then we can sell our vegetables for more money. And then we will have some money for us to buy new clothes and toys for our children. As they packed and grumbled, they would walk on the narrow path, up and around, down and around, down and around, up and around, down and around, down and around, until they got quite dizzy. And even though they were dizzy, when they reached home, they would still be grumbling and complaining. As they walked into the house where the old man was seated drinking his tea, he asked them, "What's the matter?" The oldest daughter-in-law explained to him their problem. And he thought, if daughters-in-law were unhappy, sons and grandchildren would be unhappy. So he thought about the problem. It is true, the sun did set early when it went behind the mountains. He could never see the beautiful sunsets. And in summer, the cool breeze never came, for the mountains blocked the breeze. Then he said to them, "Since the mountains are a problem, let's remove them. There are many of us, and we are strong, and if we persevere, we can move the mountains." And so the next day they started, from the youngest to the oldest. They started hacking and digging and digging and hacking. And then they put all the soil and the rocks in the baskets, and they brought them out to the sea and tipped it into the cool waters. And they worked from spring to summer to autumn to winter. They worked hard. Then one day, a visitor came. Another old man. He was known as the wise old man. He was looking rather tired, out of breath, and dizzy. And he called out to his friend, "Oh, walking this path is now getting very difficult as I get older. I don't know how many more times I can come and visit you." He was known as the wise old man. So the foolish old man told him, "I know, my friend, and that's why my children, did you see them working? They're getting rid of the mountains." The wise old man opened his eyes and looked at him and said, "That's impossible. What are you talking about?" The foolish old man looked at his friend and said, "Why? Why is it impossible? There are many of us, and the mountain's not growing any taller or bigger. And if we worked hard and persevere, we can do it. When I die, my children will continue. When my children die, their children will continue. Generations after generation, we will continue till the mountains are no longer there." The wise old man just looked at the foolish old man, and he pushed his head back and he laughed. "You are named well." But the foolish old man and his family, they worked on day after day, week after week, month after month, and year after year, and generations after generations. And they say that if you visit Hebei and province now, you will see many mountains, but not these two. Then my grandmother would come out of her dream state and suddenly look at me and say, "Hey, why you stop? Hard work and perseverance. Stitch, stitch, continue to stitch."